Have you ever wondered how small college players make it to the pros? Today we have a special guest who will be sharing his journey from the NAIA ranks to professional basketball in Australia and all the steps along the way. All right, welcome back everybody to the Pass First podcast. We're excited today. We have special guest Corey Standerfer with us today, who's going to share a bit about his journey as he made it from the NAIA level, like we just talked about earlier, to the pros in Australia. Corey, first of all, thank you for being here. If you can give us just like a quick, maybe 30 second to a minute kind of synopsis of your background, and then we'll dive into some more of the details here in a minute as well.
Yeah, I think like most players, I thought I was going to go to the NBA after high school, even though I didn't really do much. So I got recruited actually by the same school that my mom went to, which was East Central. It was a Division II school, but yeah, didn't want to go where my mom went. So I did a bunch of different tryouts and things. And I went with friends, which we can probably talk about at some point. Horrible mistake. I went to 3 or 4 different tryouts, and I think there was like 4. All of them wanted me, but only one of them wanted the friend I went with. So we obviously chose that one. And yeah, I think I did that three times. And then finally, the last time for me ended up at York College, which is in Nebraska. And it ended up being just a shot in the dark kind of. It was a 6-hour drive from my house before iPhones as well. So just had to get a map and just figure it out. But yeah, I got there. They were really welcoming. And yeah, it just felt like it was a place that I could kind of have my own journey, have my own experience. And it ended up being the best decision basketball wise for me.
Awesome. And when you're talking about that time at York, was there a time, I guess, that you started believing that playing professionally would be a reality for you?
Honestly, no. I think because the first college I went to, I redshirted that year. It was a junior college, Seminole State, which is in Oklahoma. We actually got second in the nation that year. It was a really good year for me, probably the best X's and O's coach I'd ever been around. But I didn't develop as a player. I learned all the hard work stuff. I learned all the X's and O's, but I didn't really get to develop. And then into the season came, and we had the conversation, and he basically told me I was never going to play college basketball. So I could come back, and I was mad at him at the time, but it ended up being really good for me. Shout out to Coach Mills. But I ended up just kind of going back home and just getting a job, and was just like, I guess I'll just get a head start on life and figure things out. But then, yeah, just kept going to open gyms, going to different colleges and playing against guys. And everyone's always asking, like, why aren't you playing somewhere? So yeah, I think having that experience for me, I felt like I had already lost basketball. I felt like I had already gave up on it. So once I decided to actually play and pursue it, it kind of gave me like everything was icing on the cake from that point. So once I went to college, to York College, I was like, I'll just play out. I had 2 years of eligibility by the time I actually started playing. So I had 2 years where I played. My junior and senior year, did really well, enjoyed it. And for me, that was enough. I felt like I got 2 extra years that I wasn't supposed to have. But just fortunately through relationships and like friendships, one of my teammates was an Australian. And so he played in a few different leagues over there in Australia. But as he was a year older, or graduated a year before. He's like 5 years older. But yeah, once he went back to Australia, he gave me a call the year that after I graduated. He was like, do you want to come play professionally? And honestly, at the time, I didn't want to do it. Asked my friends, talked to my mom, talked to a lot of people. And I was like, look, I've got a pretty decent job that I'm happy with. And like, I didn't even think they played basketball in Australia. So I was like, I'm pretty happy just staying here. But yeah, I ended up going, and yeah, loved it. I absolutely loved it and didn't want to leave. So that's kind of how that whole journey happened for me. It was a little bit of luck, resiliency, kind of accidentally building relationships that I didn't realize would pay off later. But yeah, it all kind of came together. And then when I look back on it, it's like, okay, it makes a little bit more sense.
As you were talking, it kind of made me, a question popped into my head just about like junior college and that new rule where now junior college doesn't count against your eligibility. I would love to get your opinion, somebody who's played at the junior college level and went on to play after.
To be honest, this probably needs a whole podcast on its own. I think where college basketball is at the moment is not what it is right now this year. It's not what it's going to be next year. It's not what it's going to be the year after. Like it's changing so much and so rapidly that it's really hard for me to put any long-term perspective into any of the rule changes. I think it's cool that more kids have opportunities to play at a lower level and not ruin their eligibility at a later level. But at the same time, it's like, yeah, that might change next year to where transfers there's just so many things changing at the time. I haven't really, a lot of people actually ask me that question. I haven't really it's hard for me to really stamp down, like if I think it's a positive or negative. We kind of just have to see how it goes and how it actually matches up with, I guess, other rules, the NIL, the transfer portal, all those other things. So we'll see the impacts of it. But yeah, it's tough for me to know right now if it's a positive or a negative.
I think that's a great answer because we don't know the long-term effects at this point. So yeah, I agree with that. That's a good perspective.
Yeah, so something, not to get too far on this tangent, but just one other thing I was thinking of that a friend of mine said the other day about that rule change or potential long-term effects that rule changes. What happens when somebody says, well, NAIA isn't NCAA. Why can't we get 4 years of NAIA and then 4 years of NCAA? And I never thought about that. And I'm like, whoa, that's a whole nother level there that like you could get into. So like you said, we could spend an hour just talking about that. So I don't want to go too far down that rabbit hole. But yeah, it's going to be interesting to see where things change. And they've definitely changed a lot since we all played, for sure. So I guess one of my follow-up questions, and you kind of talked about it a little bit, is getting over to Australia. It sounds like you had a connection with a teammate. Did you ever even look or think about looking into like getting an agent, attending a showcase, or doing anything like that?
I actually did that maybe 3 times, but I was still playing college ball and kind of, I spent a lot of times, like, never worded it this way, but I guess I was kind of chasing my friends' dreams. A lot of my teammates or friends were older, so they would always do things kind of a year ahead or 2 years ahead of me. I would just kind of tag along, and I'm like, oh, I guess that's what I want to do. I guess this is what I want to do. I didn't really think about what it was I wanted to do until, like I said, the first time I got cut at Seminole State, but then I got released from a team that, again, went with teammates, didn't work out very well, got released from that team, and that was, okay, no more. I'm making these decisions for myself. So, yeah, I think hopefully that kind of answered the question, but yeah, I didn't really think about it until getting the call. That was probably the first time I ever really understood, like, I really have an opportunity to do this. I think those times when I was going to the showcases, it was like, it'd be fun. I'd like to see what other players are like, but I don't think I took it serious enough. We'd get there 10 minutes before and just start playing and trying to impress people the wrong way, try to hit tough shots, try to stand out, talking trash. I didn't really go with like a mindset or a goal like to accomplish something. So yeah, not until I really locked in and understood what I wanted to do. That's when everything, I think, started to click, even if I didn't really put myself out there.
I think that's something that probably a lot of younger players, they can identify with or understand, is a lot of guys coming out of college, they don't know really how this process works, right? And part of the reason that we want to have these conversations is to maybe help people and guide them or help them understand that it's not a one size fits all, right? If you're the top tier blue chip guy from a high major D1 program, like, yeah, you're going to have a ton of calls and a ton of people and a ton of agents all wanting to help you. But if you're at a low major D1 or any other level, basically below that, like, you have to figure out kind of on your own what's the best path for me to get to where I want to be, right? And Og, I know you've had your experience with that. I don't know if there's anything you can shed light on with that.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think people underestimate like how many people get overseas just through like teammates or connections of people that they know personally, because there's so many like more small market teams overseas that will not want to use an agent or not. It's just agents, the checks are so small, there's not a lot of agents flocking to those specific teams, and they still need Americans, they still need players. And for those kind of teams, a lot of times they are just using past teammates. There might be a pipeline of some small NAIA school that just funnels all their best players to a certain team overseas and stuff. And yeah, I think that's just another point and proof that a lot of this comes from just personal connections. So sounds like, Corey, you were a good friends with this guy, and he would vouch for your character and also, of course, your game. So I'm guessing that's how it happened. So yeah, I
was in a really good position overseas. I ended up being a coaching director for 9 years, but I was able to like make a lot of club decisions for our club towards the end, a lot more. And exactly what you said, like the majority of the imports that I was looking for, the type of guys I would sign. And again, sometimes I would send imports to other clubs because, again, being a former import, knowing what that was like, it's like, yeah, those connections are important. This person will be a good fit. But it was like the basketball piece of that was like the third or fourth thing that we were looking at for majority of the clubs that were looking for imports. So as you guys said earlier, if you're one of the top players, those top clubs in Europe, those top clubs in Australia, wherever, they're going to find you. They're going to contact your agent, all that sort of stuff. But for everyone else, they want to know, like, how are you off the court? Like, are you willing to coach? Are you a good community guy? Like, I think a lot of people misconstrue being a professional player. Professional literally means you're just getting paid to play. It doesn't mean professional in the sense of you're going to be raking in millions of dollars and don't have to do anything because you're so good at basketball. Like, there's so much more to it. If you can somehow have someone that vouches for your character, your personality, your communicability, I think that's a word, that's a lot better of an opportunity to get overseas. We can look at everyone's highlight tapes, but we've all seen that where you see a guy that's scoring 30 points, but he gets overseas and they'll send you back home because they want to know that you're going to be good around the kids, a good influence around the younger players, but also like they're investing like a lot of time, a lot of effort. They're going to expect a lot more than just shooting the ball a lot of times.
No, that makes sense. And I think that's something that a lot of coaches try and preach, right? High school, college coaches, like character, all the X's and not just the X's and O's, but the stuff off the court. And you have some kids that get it and they understand the long-term value of that and where that value is eventually going to transfer into their working life whenever they stop playing. And then you have some kids that just don't want to hear it and they think it's just all about scoring and that's it. So it's good to hear that even at the professional ranks, whatever level you're at, they still want that professionalism that coaches are preaching, or hopefully coaches are preaching. And one thing you mentioned, just out of curiosity, in Australia, is the import rule similar? Like I know in Europe, it's usually it's like 2 imports, at least from the US. I think a lot of countries in Asia are the same. Is it the same in Australia? Do they have a maximum amount?
Obviously, from league to league or for the different levels, it's different. So one year, I think I played in maybe Division 1, and it was you're only allowed 1 import, but like the country teams that were way out in the middle of nowhere, they were allowed 2 imports actually, just to keep it like fairly even. The next level up was everyone could have 2 imports, but then I think right now the top league has changed to where you can have 2 imports, but now they're allowed like a third, kind of like you can't go get like a top tier guy, a top tier import, but you can pay for like a third lower level guy that's an import that you're supposed to develop. So you get them in, you develop them, and it's supposed to either bring them into the league the next year or get them into another level. But that was kind of their way of bringing in more players, better players, under the guys that they're also going to develop them. They're not just going to bring them over and get rid of all the Aussie guys.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I guess it still shows how limited those spots are, right? Like there's only still 2 or 3, so you've got to really not only good, but like you said, all those other details got to be there too.
Yeah, on that point, like that's another thing that people don't understand. Like if you're getting signed as an import, you're not getting signed to. There's not 1,000 spots for them to put you. Like there's, depending on what league, there might be 10, there might be 20 import spots, and they're expecting you to be better than the other imports. So really, when you're thinking about getting overseas, like you can't, a lot of times I'd come back home and some of my friends would be like, man, I'd be the second best player on that team. And I'm like, yeah, but as an import, they want you to be the best player in the league. Like they're not bringing you over to just be the third or fourth best guy on the team. They can go get more Aussies. They need a guy that can compete with the other import who might be a Division 1 guy that's 6'8", freak athlete, and is trying to dunk on everyone. It's like, we need you, who we brought over to be our point guard. We need you to go guard this guy. So yeah, I think being an import, that's something that's really important for people to understand. Like imports and players that want to play overseas, a dime a dozen, and there's so few spots. And I think that's why it is so critical to be able to fill the basketball piece of that as much as possible. But yeah, the off-court stuff, everything else on top of that.
Perfect. Awesome. So a couple other questions here is, what was one of the biggest obstacles you faced when you were moving from college basketball to the pros? And then also, how was it like the process of signing your first contract? Like, was that pretty easy? Was there any surprises, challenges? Did you have to have anyone look that over, or were you just kind of on your own, like, hey, hopefully this is the best thing I can get right now, and let's hope this works out?
Yeah. So, well, I'll answer that one first because I remember it. The most important thing for me was just the experience of playing overseas that first year. Like I said, I didn't really want to do it, but the reason I did it was my friend that got me over there talked me into it and just said, look, just come out for a week or 2 weeks, see if you like it, and then go back home if you don't like it. And I was like, well, I might as well. I might not get this opportunity again. So, and the opportunity, I knew it wasn't a lot of money. So for me, they were willing to cover everything. So they'd pay for everything. So pay for food, pay for housing, pay for car, pay for flight. So I didn't have to pay for anything. So for me, I was like, free trip, get to see if I like it. If I don't like it, come home. But then I ended up really enjoying it. And I didn't have an agent ever. I didn't have other friends that played overseas. I didn't know what to expect, but I like handling things on my own, which is why I don't have an editor. I just like to do things on my own and be in control of my stuff. Cause again, that journey with trying to do what everyone else was doing, it always got me screwed over. So trying to handle it on my own, I made a lot of mistakes, but I learned a ton too. So that first contract I signed, I actually wasn't getting paid at all. But I also didn't think I was that good. So I was like, this is just, I'm helping them, they're helping me. But I ended up getting second in voting for MVP. And I just spoke to other players that I played against, and maybe I dominated them. And then they're like, man, I'm getting this much. Everyone lies about what they're getting overseas anyway. So don't talk to other players, don't believe them. But once I started finding out kind of what other guys were getting, I realized like, I'm kind of getting screwed over. So, and most clubs, whether they mean to do it or don't mean to do it, you're probably going to get screwed over in your contract. So it's really important to be able to fight for yourself and like know your value. You don't really know it until you start advocating for yourself and having those conversations. Don't be scared to have those conversations. Ask for a little bit more or ask for other things. If you aren't comfortable with it, don't sign it if you're not comfortable. But yeah, once I started having those conversations, that very next year was the first year. So it was my second year where I was paid full time to only play. So first year I had to do other things to get extra money, did some coaching on the side, helped out people with odd jobs, whatever around the club or whatever. But that next year I was like, hey, I got second in MVP. I have all these other clubs that are reaching out to me like, this is exactly what I need, or I'll go somewhere else. So I had a much better opportunity, much better experience that second time. And then from there, I started to understand my value a little more, building my resume, my portfolio a little more. So it got easier as I went. And then, yeah, I was super happy I didn't go the agent route or have someone else handle it, because then I could advocate a lot more every single year. Don't remember what the first question was.
It's all good. Yeah. Well, first off, thanks. I thought that was great insight into all that. And I think that's very valuable information for again, other prospective players that are looking at how this can work to use. The first part of the question was, what was the biggest obstacle for you coming out of college and then going to play overseas? Whether it was on the court or off the court, what was that big challenge for you?
I'll try to answer them quick. Just two things basically was being away from family is obviously really tough, but because I'd already done that once. I'd already gave up basketball and knew what I was willing to give up. I'd already gone back home and seen what it was like back home. So I'm like, well, I'll drive 6 hours away and be at college. I want to do my own thing, chase my own dream. So doing that again, going overseas, it was actually exciting for me. It was another opportunity to have a really successful couple years or whatever. So that being away part for most people, and I have seen it, the majority of people do struggle with it. So I don't want to make light of it and say it's going to be easy. It is very tough. And even for me, who loves being on his own, it was very difficult, very tough. But I knew the reward, the risk reward. So I was happy to go into that. And then on the court, honestly, it was backing yourself a little bit more, because you're not just a player anymore. You're kind of your own business. So I had to get over the mindset of, I had to learn how to be selfish a little bit in a business sense. So if we're up 20 points and I had 8 points, most coaches will just sub out their import. I'll sit you down. I had to start fighting for myself to be like, no, I have to stay. I have to get my 20 points. I have to get my 20 and 10 or 30 and 15, whatever it was for the league I was in. I was like, I have to do that. Like, I've got to sell myself again next year. Not doing it in a way where I'm taking away from wins or taking away opportunities from my teammates. But I would say things like, well, put all the young guys on with me. Like, it's good for them to play with the import. I'll get my assists up. I'll set them up. I'll get as many rebounds as I can. But that's something I had to learn how to do, playing a little selfish. The other thing was learning to play like every position. So I was 6'5" at a NAIA that's kind of tall. So I was like our post player. We were really small though, but I was our post guy. And then we didn't have a point guard my first year. So we played against Sadell Threat's son, actually. And he was picking up our point guard full court, and he probably had 3-4 steals in a row. And they were yelling at him on the sidelines like he doesn't want to bring it up. And in that moment, it kind of clicked for me. I was like, I have to go get this ball. Like, I'm the import. It's my job. So I went and got it. And then they're pressuring me full game, different guards on me the whole time, and made it really difficult. And I realized, like, my left hand isn't as strong as I thought it was. My conditioning isn't as good as what I thought it was. So it took me about 2 or 3 weeks to understand, like, okay, what's expected of me is a little bit more, but it was a fun challenge to be like, well, this is a good opportunity for me to learn how to play point guard. Then the next year it might be small forward or power forward, whatever the team needs. But I knew if I used that opportunity to learn, it would again set me up better for that next season.
Og, did you find you had any experiences kind of similar to that, where you had to play multiple positions and learn different things?
Yeah, Corey said it right. I mean, you have to play multiple positions over there. And like for me, it was going from shooting guard and having to play more point guard. I mean, I'm not a post player by any means, so I couldn't really handle that. But I do think that the Americans are expected to do everything.
It makes sense. Like you said, if you're bringing in guys and you're expecting them to be the best player on your team, oftentimes it's gonna turn to them to do whatever is needed at that time, right? To win the game or take care of the ball or just put yourself in a position to have a better season. So, and I did like the part where you were talking about how you have to kind of market yourself. And it's something that I've thought about. You hear guys talk about that in the NBA, like, oh, it's his contract year, so now he's showing out, right? And it's kind of like a joke, but at the same time, it's serious because they're actually going to get paid potentially tens or 20, 30 million dollars, and they could lose 10, 20, 30 million dollars if they're not playing well at that time. And then sometimes you see that lax, like they get the contract and all of a sudden they're not playing as hard, right? And hopefully your great players don't do that, but you do see that happen where guys, when you were saying that, I was thinking like, wow, that's probably what happens in the NBA. It's no different, right? It's a lot more money, but it's the same concept. So anyways, one other thing here, and you kind of talked about a misconception earlier about how guys will think, oh, if I can go overseas, like I'm better than the third, fourth guy, I could make that team. Are there any other, like, is there one other major misconception that people have about playing overseas that when you think of it, you're like, this is one that comes to mind right off the bat?
I've kind of just grown accustomed to assuming like no club, no league, no level is the same. So the one misconception I would have is that there's tons of misconceptions. Like whatever you've heard about playing overseas, it's just like even playing for the same club year to year might be different. Like I had 1 year where I played in England, and I actually left halfway through the year because I hadn't got paid. And it was a good club, like it was fine, but didn't get paid. It was a pretty low level, and we practiced once a week. So for me, like I'm practicing every day, and I've got guys that are working full-time jobs, and then we're expected to go on the court and win. If we don't win, it's kind of my fault because I'm practicing every day. These are people that are playing semi-pro. It's semi-pro for them, but it was professional for me. So I think that story, and compared to my first year, those are complete different situations. So saying like, oh, I played professionally, yeah, those are completely different though. So I think the main misconception is just people, they have an idea in their head. Whatever you think that is, it's like, that's not it. So every club is completely different. Like, nothing will be the same. Even from year to year, like I said, you might be dealing with a different club president. You might be dealing with a different committee altogether. Your agent might represent 20 players in that league or in that area. So they might just not give you as good of a deal as someone else got, or just swap players. So yeah, I think there's just so much out there, so much information, so many differences that it's hard to pinpoint like the most, but I think that's the best way I would explain it. Just like everything's different. Don't be surprised if you go overseas and they're expecting you to play for free. Don't be surprised if you go to a club that's out in the middle of nowhere, doesn't win a lot of games, and they treat you better than any other team in the league, because for them, it's about the community aspect. They've got donors that are willing to pay for you to come give one speech a year, and then you're living it up. So yeah, it can range all over.
Sure. Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, right, different parts of the world, different types of clubs, different leagues, different levels. First division in one country could be completely different than the first division in another country, right? So yeah, that I definitely understand all the differences, or I can't say I understand, but I can understand where you're coming from, and I think that's good to put that out there. Okay, last question here on the overseas part specifically is, and I guess kind of tying back into your college days, if you could give yourself advice, like if you could go back in time and give yourself advice to your college self, what would you do differently in preparing to try and play overseas? And maybe what advice would you give to current players that are looking to follow in those same kind of footsteps and continue their playing career after college is done?
That's always a tough question, right? Because what I did kind of led me to where I ended up without getting cut. Like, I was really soft. I didn't play aggressively. I wasn't selfish enough. Like, if there was an open shot for me and a teammate, I'd always pass it up. So that's why I got cut, because I was too soft. I just didn't understand. But the day I got cut, I came back for open gym and I thought I was the best player in there because I was so angry and I was so mad. And the coach had asked me to come back in. He was like, well, maybe you can come back next year. But I was young and spiteful and was like, no, I'll never play for you. So I would tell myself in that moment, like, that feeling that you have, like, you have to find a way to, like, plug into that. Every practice, every weight session, every time you go out and play, like, you have to have that chip on your shoulder that, like, you can be cut any moment. Like, you're not special. There's so many players out there. Everyone's playing hard. So people are like, just play hard. You got to want it more than everyone else. Everyone wants it. Everyone wants that dream of going to the NBA. So, like, what sets you apart? For me, it was that moment, I think, that really changed the trajectory. And then obviously the second thing was just make sure it's what you want to do and not what your friends want to do or what everyone's telling you should do. Some people say don't go play overseas if you're not getting a certain amount. I'll only play for a certain amount. But for me, getting my foot in the door is what opened up an entire career for me. So, yeah, I think probably those two things I would say to younger players. Got to find a way to want it every single day. And kind of like Michael Jordan, like, pretend like people hate you. Like, if you got to print something off and post it into your locker and pretend someone's talking trash about you, and that's what motivates you every day, you got to find a way to kick into that, because every day you're doing that in practice is a day you're improving, you're getting better, but then you step into a game and you're doing it too. Like, you're separating yourself from other players. So I wish I would have known that earlier, but I had to learn it from somewhere, I suppose.
Og, anything from you that's kind of similar or different from that?
No, I think he pretty much nailed it. I think that's all good stuff. And I think, like, for me, it was very similar. From high school, being a pass-first point guard, getting into college, kind of got turned into a shooting guard and kind of tasted what it felt like to score 20 points. And that's when I kind of started getting my more killer instinct, is kind of what Corey was talking about. And then to go overseas, it's even on another level as far as killer instinct goes. Because like you said, you're the assassin being brought in to score 30 and get the team the win and hit the game winner and do all that kind of stuff. So if you're not built like that, then the overseas stuff is not for you. Because, I mean, unless you're like a EuroLeague type player, but like these more small market teams, like, they need you to come over and just put up 30. So it's crazy. But if you don't have that kind of, and a lot of players don't really have that. I know I never did until I was put in that position. You could struggle doing that.
Yeah, and I think kind of another thing, like you said, unless those EuroLeague guys or whatever, those are the top cream of the crop. I mean, there are a lot of guys that are high major D1 guys that can't make it in the EuroLeague because the competition is still too good, or the mentality and mindset. I mean, I've always heard that the grind in Europe and other parts of the world, I'm sure as well, is much more difficult from a physicality level and the expectations and the practices and all the other stuff compared to just any level of Division I college basketball here. Like, you're not pampered as much, but you're still expected to perform. So I'm assuming that also ties into it as well.
That's really important too. Like, you don't have a coach or a trainer or someone telling you what to do every single day. So like I said, in England, like, we practiced once a week as a team. So they were expecting me to do whatever it is you do to stay good, but they don't know what that is. So you might have to go to the weight room every day and go and get shots up every day or do whatever workout it is for you. But you don't have someone like handing you a schedule and saying this is where you got to be, unless, like you said, if you're in the top EuroLeague, like, yep, they've got their whole team, they're telling you what to do. But even that, at some point, those imports are expected to do the little extra things on their own, take care of themselves, as well as the team stuff.
Well, I think first off, that was great as far as just anything dealing with small college basketball, getting overseas, what it looks like, what you need as a player. So I think that was a lot of great information that hopefully somebody's watching this and they can pull from that, and it'll help them on their journey. But now we're going to shift the conversation a little bit and maybe get a little bit more controversial. I don't know if that's the right word for this. Okay. But Corey, you just recently, I guess a couple weeks ago, made a video about, what was it? The downfall of basketball in America. I think that was the title, something like that. Yeah. That's all right. We're okay. And so I watched it and Augie watched it. And that's actually how this conversation kind of started was we watched it, and I thought you did a fantastic job of pointing out all the problems with the social media highlight culture that basketball has really evolved into. And I think it's always been there. I mean, the whole idea of highlight tapes and things like that go back way back, right, to VHS tapes at a certain point for players marketing themselves, but it was different. Like, it wasn't the same way. You might have sent a highlight tape out at the end of your high school career or maybe the end of your college career to try and get a team to look at you, and that was it. Now a kid walks into the gym and puts their shoes on and they got a highlight tape of them doing that, and it's like, why do we have slow-mo videos of this? And it's, as crazy as that sounds, I guarantee you we could find a slow-mo shoe video if we really looked hard enough. So I guess the question here, so first off, for anyone listening, if you get a chance, go watch that video. I posted it on my Instagram and I said every coach and player in the United States needs to watch this video right now, and I was dead serious about that, because I think we have a problem, and I'm concerned with the way that basketball is, where we're heading with basketball in the United States. I can't speak on other parts of the world. I coached at a junior college for a while, and we had a lot of international players there. We probably had, in my 6 years there as a coach, 45 kids from overseas, 45 kids. We had a lot. And their view on basketball was very different from us in the United States. And so I feel like I've gotten a fairly decent view of maybe what the basketball looks like outside of the U.S. But here, it's definitely heading down a certain route that I'm a little concerned about. So my first question is, when did you notice this basketball shifting from fundamentals, just teaching people how to play the game and it being about your performance on the court, into now where it's more of a highlight driven culture and more of an attention, I would call it attention seeking, I guess, culture? When do you think that shift happened?
I think it always starts from the top down. Like, everyone watches the NBA more than anything, probably any other basketball content. And you start watching that at a really young age. And again, like, a lot of the stars that are being put up on a pedestal aren't the ones that are like the winners necessarily, but it's the ones that like look the coolest. So I'm a huge fan of basketball in general, so I like all the NBA guys, but like Allen Iverson, for example, there was more there about Allen Iverson than just winning. Obviously, he's like one of the greatest ever, but there was a part about him that you couldn't pinpoint, and people couldn't understand why they gravitated towards him. And then I think the NBA recognized that too, and it's like, oh, we have stories here. Like, at some point, the NBA went from just being about the basketball and you got to win to stay relevant, and went to how do we market all these other teams? How do we market Philadelphia 76ers? Well, they've got Allen Iverson. Like, we can market and sell jerseys through that. So I think once basketball or NBA, started becoming it, honestly, it's a lot. It's hard to tell sometimes if it's about basketball or entertainment. And I think once the NBA started crossing that line, not that other people could foresee it, and they're like, oh, I'll start doing this, but social media got easier. Everyone's got a phone. You can just post things, and the stuff that people are clicking on and watching more of, it's the flash, it's the highlights. If I looked at y'all's podcast, and I think you guys have spoken about a lot of really interesting things. I watched the one that was about how to build your core skills or something, and it actually ended up being just a coaching conversation, you two talking about your concepts that you have to put your players in the best place or the best positions to develop their core skills. And that's really what coaching is, but it's not going to get the clicks as if you say, here's how to build your core skills, 20 seconds of you guys just doing some cone dribbles. Everyone's going to click on that and everyone's going to like it. So it's a mixture of all of that, and then it just starts feeding itself, obviously. And then once people start getting paid for those things and seeing positive reinforcement, the cycle just goes on. And now how many young kids are wanting to be pro trainers? And I didn't even know that was a job when I was a kid. I just wanted to play. So now they all want to be pro trainers, but they don't even want to play basketball necessarily. So yeah, I think it's just a force that's come along, and we haven't really, as coaches, we haven't done a good job preparing for it. It's almost impossible to see it coming, but how many coaches are good at recording a YouTube entertaining video, editing it, putting it out, and making it like a thought out product? I know plenty of coaches that are far better than me. They would never touch something like this, because how do you get into it? So I think as coaches, we're behind the eight ball. And unfortunately, we do need to play the game a little bit. Like, we need to find a way to make it entertaining. We need to find a way to get kids to understand this is what it's really going to take. And at the end of the day, like I said, I was really fortunate to be in the position I was in, being in charge of so many coaches and players every single year. And what I found was, like, if you talk to the kids and you have a conversation with the kids, they'll be fairly receptive and they'll understand what you're saying. But once it filters through the adult and then it goes to social media and all these other things, like, that's when it starts getting screwed up. So if we can find a way to make it entertaining for I say kids, but 21 and under, even adults or young players wanting to get better, if we can find a way to make it more entertaining or just more have people looking forward to that type of content, we can actually teach them a lot of really cool stuff. And that's just where coaches, like, we just don't do that stuff. So I think that's my take on it anyways.
Yeah. No, I think that was a good take. Og, anything that you want to add there?
Yeah, just as far as like social media, the role it has too is like, I was thinking, like, nowadays it seems almost normal for, like, if you want your kid to play in college and he has goals to do that like you have to kind of start that highlight reel account like when they're in middle school, right? So you see the dad opening up a Twitter account under his child's name or an Instagram account or YouTube channel, and they're hunting for highlight clips to post there to market their kids. And just from swiping around on Instagram and stuff, I'll find these kids sometimes and I'm like, whoa, this kid is super talented. And I'll click on their profile and I'm like, dang, dude, they already have like 100,000 followers and they're like in 8th grade. And so there is like a method to the madness in a way where the parents are doing this in order to try to help them get to the next level, which I think does work. But at the same time, it's not showcasing good fundamentals and all that kind of stuff. It's showcasing essentially them hitting tough shots, which as coaches and a varsity coach, like, I don't want my kids shooting tough shots. I understand they're going to shoot some and they're going to make them and those will go in the highlight. But it just kind of gives everyone kind of this false sense of what it takes to get to college is all the shake and bake and the step back, James Harden step backs and stuff, which isn't really true. And I think that's where we get the false sense of what it takes to be a good player and to get to the next level.
Yeah, for sure. Do you guys think that social media has changed the way that players develop their skills and just their approach to the game? Do you think that it's having a significant impact on that?
Okay. Yeah, 100%. And I think it's actually in the infancy of that. Hopefully what I was hoping to accomplish with my video was kind of start the other side of it where it's like, okay, we can use this and actually make it fundamental. We can use this and actually really teach. Like, someone paved us the way and, like, look how many kids you can influence. Now we can kind of take that and do it the right way. So when I was younger, like, I didn't have anything I could watch. And I grew up in Oklahoma. There's not a lot of good basketball happening in Oklahoma. I had coaches that didn't really know what to do or what to teach. So I would just do what they told me. But I'd be outside practicing and one stuff all the time because that's all I had access to. And one VHS tapes, and I was doing all these crazy moves. But then you go try them and they're not working. You don't understand why. So I know that feeling as a kid of, like, I want to work hard. I'll put in the time. I'll put in the effort. I just need to know what to do. I think social media is that. Like, the parent might not have the information. They might not have an adult or a coach around them that has the right information. So social media kind of fills that gap of, like, well, the kid can just swipe and find something. Doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be good. They can't tell if it's going to be good or if it's going to be bad, but this is kind of their and one mixtape. It looks cool. It has a lot of likes. It has to be good.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And I think, Augie, you and I talked about this in our last episode a little bit, that there's actually more information out right now compared to, I mean, definitely there's more compared to 10, 15 years ago. It's just you have to sift through so much bad information to find the good information. And you can make that argument probably for anything. It's not solely basketball, right? That's the world we live in now, is all information you're sifting through good and bad to find what the real info is that you need. So I think what you're talking about with trying to create something that can give people the right info, and hopefully we can steer people towards that. And that's, I think, what Augie and I are trying to do here as well, is like provide real information. You're right, it's not as flashy. We're not going to get 1 million clicks probably, but hopefully we can build enough where people will say, oh, this is actually useful, and maybe this is where we want basketball to grow, right? Now, you've talked before about problems with social media trainers in general. What concerns you the most about just that kind of I don't know if it's niche anymore, but that whole thing of being a trainer online and making all these videos and trying to get as many views as possible. Like what's your biggest concern with that?
I think for me, the reason I made that video, like a lot of people were pretty upset with it, especially a lot of the people I put in the video, understandably so. But for me, it's not the views, or it's not the, oh, I didn't like this drill, but it's like again, you guys coach, like you understand what it means to put that time and effort into your players, build those relationships. You would never put them in, hopefully, you would never put them in like compromising positions to better yourself. So if a kid gets hit in the head, they've got a concussion or whatever, you don't know if it's a concussion. Like it's up to us as adults, it's up to us as coaches to be like, that's my best player, but I need to look after their safety. You sit out, like it's just the right thing to do. We'll figure it out later. We'll try to win without it, right? You got to put the kids before winning. I feel like views and getting that gratification through views is winning. People are putting the views and the winning over the kids. So some of those influencers that I put on there, their videos with kids that were posting that they're injuring themselves and my knees are starting to hurt really bad, or I really messed up my ankle doing this, or my elbow is starting to hurt. It's not that they posted the video, because I make mistakes all the time. I do drills where maybe too many basketballs are flying around, someone lands on one, I'm like, Jesus, why would I do that? But I change. I grow from that. I don't do it anymore. These guys will leave it up because it got a lot of views. So for me, that's one of the red flags of like, if you're willing to play the view game, and then you might not have a drill for a day, so you just make up a drill to put something up, it starts feeding that cycle of like, well, you're putting the views over the players. If this were all adults, like the fitness industry does this, I had a whole segment in there about the fitness industry, but the video was already too long, so I just cut it out. But talking about the fitness industry is probably the first place I recognize it happens. But that's like, adults can make their own decisions, kind of. If you're directing that towards adults, I don't really mind. But these are kids, and I feel like it's very predatory practice of just like, it's easy money, easy views, doesn't matter like the cost. And I think if it was a net neutral, I wouldn't care. But to know that I was one of those kids that wanted information, I bought the jump soles, I bought the air alerts, I bought these programs from people online to try and get better, and it set me backwards. And then when I got to college, luckily I was 6'5", like luckily. So I had the opportunity to go to college. A lot of these kids aren't, so they just miss out. But luckily I was 6'5", got a chance to get to college. But then everything I learned there that propelled me for the rest of my career was catch and shoot, like catch and move the ball, sprint hard, like be in shape, lift weights. And no one's talking about that. Exactly what Augie just said. Like, no one's talking about those parts. And those are the most critical parts to these kids' development. And injury prevention.
I remember when I was watching the video, there were a couple of the guys that you had in there that I knew just, honestly, when the videos like that pop up, I stopped clicking on them because I don't even want it showing up on my algorithm. So I try to not watch it. But sometimes I've seen some of the guys I'd never heard of before. But what I found most interesting, and I know this is going to be controversial, but I'm okay with it, is that so many of the guys didn't really even play. Like, they never played, or they played for like a year and that was it. And I've thought about that a lot. And I'm like, well, I feel that a lot of the guys that get into that and haven't played, it's a compensation for like, I could have made it and I should have made it. So let me show you guys why. And now I'm going to go viral and I'm going to be this famous coach. That's my personal opinion on it. Now, maybe that's wrong, but I just feel like I see that so often. And it's like, okay, if you didn't make it and you still want to train kids, that's fine. Like, that's okay. But when you become gimmicky and you also didn't play, it's like, well, why would someone go to you? In my head, I'm like, why would I go to that? You're not qualified from a playing standpoint, and you're not really qualified from a coaching standpoint. It's not like you were a 10-year coach or something. So now why are you doing these things just to get views? That to me feels weird. And that's where I'm kind of like, to me, it just seems like you're compensating for the fact that you never made it to maybe the level you thought you were going to. And I don't know, maybe that's just me that feels that way. And maybe that's a controversial take, but I think it's probably the truth.
I'm not sure if Augie had something, but I have my human emotions, my personal feelings, my competitive feelings. I feel all those exact same things. I see some trainers that I would destroy this guy when I was, so but I try to sift through as making content on it. I tried to sift through all of those emotions and actually understand like what was objectively bad, what things what things can be overcome, what things can they improve on. So what I tried to do was kind of offer a challenge of like, this is what I don't like. This I don't agree with. This is whatever. Like, so I feel all those same things you feel, but I actually feel it's even worse than that with just like one of my main coaching pillars for myself is I never want to be the ceiling for my players. So I've had so many coaches that coached me that like they were the ceiling. I could never get past their knowledge. Like they never put me in a position to like do better. And I was stuck with that coach for 4 years. Then I get a new coach and now I'm stuck at their ceiling. One thing I've tried to do is never be that ceiling. Cause as I said, I think I have a ton of experience, a ton of playing, coaching, whatever, but I also don't think it's necessary to be a good coach. You just have to like be over yourself. And then once someone gets to your ceiling or you don't know what to teach them, like it's okay to be like, I don't know. Let me find someone who can be that next person, or let me keep improving myself before I'm telling this player where to go. So I think it's incredibly important, and something that's not happening is like there's no checks and balances, which is whatever, but they're also not improving. So some of the guys that I made this video about, they messaged like a one thing message, like, you don't know anything about me and whatever. But then I would offer back to them, okay, well, can you point out what you disagree with? And maybe we can have a conversation. And like none of them responded. And that's the issue. And I think that's the thing that you guys are offering. So I don't think you have to make your content entertaining, because I think what you guys are doing is awesome, but you're just having coach conversations. And it feels like the conversations I have with my coach colleagues. And there's a lot of times where you guys will say something like, well, this is what I like to do. I like to try this, whatever. And then the other will respond and be like, oh, that's interesting. Why do you do that? And that offers that opportunity to like grow, learn, think about, is this good? Is it bad? And you challenge each other like in a positive way, but that's what's not happening in that influencer space. And once they're met with any type of feedback, it's just like, well, you're a hater, and that's it. And it's like, you can be really good. A lot of those guys can be really good. It's just like, just improve as you're doing it.
And I think also too, understanding like the why behind what they're teaching. Like I think a lot of those guys are teaching stuff because they saw Steph Curry do it in the NBA game or whatever, but they don't understand the why of using this specific footwork in this specific instance, when that's really what the players need to know, is the why. So that's always been something that kind of just bothered me.
Well, last question here. Do you think we can ever return back to that fundamental first approach? Like, can we ever get back the game? It's not going to look exactly like it did 10, 15 years ago as far as how we coach, how we train. Things are ever evolving, right? But can we get back to it being about the game and it being about the players? Or are we kind of stuck in this highlight culture, and is this basically where we're headed right now, and don't see any foreseeable change in the future? What do you think?
I kind of have two approaches to this. I've got my wishful thinking and I've got my doomer goggles on. I think what's the main complaints everyone's hearing about the NBA at the moment? It's like no defense and they don't do this and whatever. And I always think the pendulum of trends and things, it swings right back and forth. And right now we're in like defense has no chance right now. Like can't play 3 seconds. The space on the court is insane. Like too many shooters, like the court's just big in itself. Can't hand check, like can't be too physical. And even like the fouls on jump shots or whatever, like you're not getting that stuff overseas. Watching the Olympics though was the best basketball I think I've ever seen in my life. This past year's Olympics, really enjoyed it. But I think a lot of other people did too. But the NBA has to understand, like people actually want that now. People are asking for that. So hopefully that pendulum starts swinging back towards, well, we'll get more people watching if we can swing it back to defense a little bit. People want to see lower scoring games. People want to see the grit and the grind. Like everyone loved it. So hopefully it starts swinging back. So that's my positive thinking. The doomer thinking is exactly what I mentioned before, of just when I make a video, for example, I try to think about, I thought about it for a long time. Like, why is there not more content like this out there? Like, I wish I would have had that when I was younger. It's hard to make. It's really, really hard to make a well-informed video with fundamentals and explaining the why and breaking it down, but also making people want to watch it. Like, I have to come up with skits and intros, and the editing takes forever, and I've got to put jokes in there. And I enjoy doing all that, but I can make a video a week maybe. Whereas how many social media quick little CapCut videos are people making. They can do them every day. They can do 20 in a day and then just schedule them out over the month. So realistically, I think this is just where we're at. And I think it's not going to be the players now that are it's not necessarily going to be the players that are the best. It's going to be the players that have a good structure around them, like adults around them, helping them navigate this space. We just talked about the college space is changing every year. I think people it's more important now than ever, players having a strong mentors around them, strong adults that are willing to call out nonsense. Doesn't mean you have to make a video on it, but if there's a coach that's recruiting or poaching players, as an adult, it's kind of your job to call that out. Even as other coaches, you said this is going to be controversial. I don't want to say it. We have to normalize that. It doesn't mean we got to call people out and blast them and say, never listen to this coach again, but we got to hold each other accountable and just say, hey, I don't like what you're doing. Stop poaching players. Like, there's a way to have these conversations. And that might make that coach not like you, but they've got to start being the ones that feel uncomfortable in these spaces, not coaches that have a lot of good knowledge, a lot of interesting things to say, and a lot of interesting things for us to learn and continue growing. So I think we just got to slowly change the space and slowly make it a little bit better. Hopefully we can kind of be those adults that are paving the way for some players. Hopefully we can be those mentors. But yeah, I think this is where we are. I think this is the battle, and I'm not expecting everyone to go to battle, but like, this is something I'm willing to do. I'm really passionate about it. Plenty more videos I want to make and a lot more research going into those about that sort of stuff. But yeah, I think it's just a battle, and maybe that's just my purpose in the basketball space of being able to call some things out. But yeah, as a coaching community, I think now you guys bringing me on to have the conversation, like, you could easily been like, we don't want any part of that. But I think that's the first step. Me putting something out because I felt a certain way. The amount of messages and comments and emails and people reaching out to me because they felt the exact same way. It lets me know that I hit on something that, okay, maybe this is really important, and maybe this is something that is worth pursuing. Again, not for, as we said, the clicks, but it's like to get people to understand, like, kids, if this is really your dream, if this is really what you want to do, there are positive places to go. There are places to get good resources. You can also watch the other stuff for entertainment. You can also watch those creators, enjoy their stuff, but don't sign up to a $200 program. That's not how Chris Paul got to the NBA. That's not how all these D1 players are getting to D1. Like, they're D1 athletes. That's how they got there. For everyone that was lower, for me, probably for you guys, like, the way you got to where you were in college was like, yeah, you picked up one fundamental and you mastered it, and that was your thing. Like, that's the thing I do. I mastered that. And then from there, it's just like, okay, what else can I pick up? What else can I add to my game? But yeah, it wasn't quick 20-second videos teaching you all these extra moves, the and one moves that there's no spot for them really, except the NBA.
I think that's a great response, and I think that's a great way to wrap this episode up. There's not much more to add. I thought you were really eloquent with that, so thank you for sharing all of that. Again, if you guys have not seen it, go check out The Mid-Range is the name of the YouTube channel. And go ahead, tell me one more time the name of that video specifically.
I think it's Basketball is Dying in America, I think.
Yeah, that's right. Basketball is Dying in America. So check that out on The Mid-Range. Corey, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate you for coming on and having this conversation. If you guys are still watching at home, thank you guys for following along with us. This is the Pass First podcast. You can like and subscribe if you're watching on YouTube. If you're listening on some audio platform, you can follow us there as well. Hopefully you gained something from this episode that you can take and use in your future. And other than that, we'll see you guys in the next episode.